A very good evening and a warm welcome to all the attendees, faculty members, and our esteemed guest, Dr. Ashok Lahiri sir, for today's session, organized by Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics and the Pune International Center. Before beginning with the session, kindly note the following. Firstly, make sure that your phones are on silent mode to avoid any disturbances during the session. Secondly, there will be a Q&A session towards the end of the speech, so you can jot down your questions for later. Today, we have amongst us Dr. Ashok Kumar Lahiri, an eminent economist. Having served as the 12th Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India, he is also serving as a member of the 15th Finance Commission and the member of the West Bengal Legislative Assembly from Balurghat. Being an excellent orator and an ardent, articulate personality, he was also the chairman of the Bandhan Bank, is a reader at the Delhi School of Economics, an executive director of the Asian Development Bank, and the director of the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy. Being an ardent researcher, he's published his work on economic and social issues. And today, he would be talking about his views on India in Search of Glory. I would like to welcome our Vice Chancellor, sir, to address the gathering with a few words.
Thank you, Varsha, and good evening to all of you. I join all of you and Varsha in welcoming Dr. Ashok Lahiri. We are delighted and privileged to have you here today. As Varsha said, he'll speak about India in search of glory. You know, this line, I'm tempted to say that whatever you say about India, there's a classic line from Joan Robinson. She said back in the 1960s that whatever you say about India is true, and so is the opposite. So, India in search of glory, some of you may say, isn't it already glorious? Why do we need to search for glory? But we will hear from Dr. Lahiri. I want to add a few more things what Varsha told you. As she said, he was actually a very popular professor of economics at Delhi School of Economics. He was also part of the finance ministry for a very long time. He represented India in the Asian Development Bank as an executive director. Not just India, I'm told Afghanistan, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Tajikistan. Yeah, so several countries. In his earlier economist days, he was also known as a group of I call it the notorious four, but maybe it's trio of cephalogists, that is people who forecast elections. And the other two were Mr. Surjit Bhalla, also India's representative in the IMF, and Prannoy Roy, the founder of NDTV. So those were the days, I think, when you had this is pre various C poll and D polls and all that we see nowadays. But it's a very long journey from professor and cephalogist and ADB director to member of the constitutional body like the Finance Commission. And since he was into election forecasting, I think he at some point decided to jump into elections. And he won the Vidhan Sabha elections in West Bengal and is now a member of the opposition. Actually, some people say that were it not for the electoral fortunes of the party, he might very well have been the finance minister of Bengal. So I know of only, I was telling him that I know of only one other person, maybe there are more, but who were a hardcore economist, proper professor of economics and teaching economics, to become a politician elected in a democratic way, and that person became the finance minister of Greece, Mr. Yanis Varoufakis. So maybe now, you know, we might have another person, a proper economist who becomes the finance minister. So, on that note again, a very warm welcome to you, and we look forward to your talk on India in search of glory. Thank you.
Vice Chancellor Ranade, Dr. Kelkar, honorable professors and faculty of Gokhale Institute, and dear students. So I must say that I'm delighted to be here. I have been to Gokhale Institute. You can't be an economist and not been to Gokhale Institute, but Ajit today reminded me that I must have come about 30 years ago, my last visit, 40 years ago. And today I am delighted that I started my tour of Gokhale Institute by visiting the house that where Gokhale Sahib lived for some time, and also the old house where the Constituent Assemblies, at least part of it, met for some time. I must tell you that Ajit Ranade has promised that he will call me again. So I want to be back again. Now the topic of today is India in Search of Glory. There is a book there. It's about 800 pages. I'm ashamed of it slightly, or embarrassed, but I couldn't do it in any less. Now, let me start right away that we Indians are very proud of our heritage, and many of us believe that we will attain its potential or rightful glory. You remember the song, Sare Jahan Se Acha Hindustan Hamara? In Bengali, there are many songs which our nationalists wrote about how this is the best country. Now, Nobel laureate Amartya Sen and John Reyes has written a book called An Uncertain Glory, India and Its Contradictions. They have pointed out in many ways the socio-economic characteristics India lags behind the East Asian countries, including Bangladesh of all. But if the people want the glory, and there is democracy, my question is it possible that, or what is the risk that we will not attain the glory? To my mind, you remember Anthony Down's famous statement that politicians don't win elections to formulate policies, but they formulate policies to win elections. So if people want glory, people want development, growth, is it possible that Indian democracy will fail us? I think no. Democracy will deliver. Now, to most people, democracy and democratic rights are inalienable. It's our birthright to have democracy. And we Indians, our forefathers, have pursued it with steadfast determination. In the post-colonial period, India was an exception. It was very early days. They didn't have adult franchise in many of the European and American countries, the United States, when we had adult franchise. So, the question is not about democracy as an end in itself. The question is about democracy as an instrument of governance. That's what we are asking. Now, most of you, or all of you, are students of economics, and to you, inter-party competition looks remarkably like competition among producers in a free market. So, and we know Pareto optimality, the first theorem of welfare economics, that if you have competitive markets under some suitable conditions, you'll have Pareto efficient or Pareto optimal outcomes, where no one can be made better off without making someone worse off. So the question is in a inter-party competition in democracy going to deliver that optimality result? Now, I was surprised to read Gary Becker, one of the Nobel laureates. As far back as 1958, he commented that ignorance and the large scale required of political organizations, I'll come back to each of them, periodic rather than continuous elections, and different preferences among members of the voting community, electorate. And these factors can produce imperfections. How? Ignorance. I don't even know. I'm, for no fault of mine, but for the systemic failure, I haven't had the education. So I don't know the issues. What can I say about uniform civil code? What can I say about whether tax GST should be increased, GST should have 3 bands? So ignorance can be a major problem. Second, large scale required in political organization. Say I won an election, but I can tell you, elections cannot be won on my own. You need large scale organization. You need to reach out to people. You need to organize the campaign. So you cannot do it as an individual. then periodic rather than continuous elections. Once you have elected me from Balurghat, you are stuck with me. Even if you find out that you have committed a mistake, I'm a great thief, a very inefficient, corrupt politician, you can't do anything about me. You have to live with it. And the differences, see, identity politics. If I become too much aware of the fact that my friend Dr. Srifat Dekne is a Maharashtrian and I am a Bengali, and if he gains, I must stop it. These kind of identity politics can be a major problem. So, the question is, with all these imperfections, India, we had all the problems that whatever I have mentioned was there at that time in 1950 when we adopted our constitution. So was it a mistake? And mind you, the counterfactual is very strong. The counterfactual is that East Asian countries, name anyone, including Japan, they didn't have the full-fledged democracy that we had. We pursued right from the beginning. They had the policy of development first, democracy later. Whereas we followed democracy first, development later. Was it a mistake? So let me start from the beginning. You agree, as proud Indians, that first things first, and building a nation and the integrity of the nation is more important than anything else. And mind you, our forefathers have done a remarkable job. There were more than 560 princely states. The India that we live in, it didn't exist before 1947. I mean, you can go back to the days of Chandragupta Maurya. I'm not a historian, but I think one single nation, India, is a major product of the post-independence period. Now, Indian democracy helped in building that nation and that country. Mind you, there is a huge diversity. Even in the United States, you'll find there is a diversity. There are blacks, there are whites. Even among whites of different, there are whites of different extractions, Irish whites, Spain, Italians, and then you have the northerners and southerners. In India, our diversity is even more. Don't take me otherwise. I believe strongly that there is something very fundamental which unites us. You may be a vegetarian, you may speak Marathi, I am a fish-eating Bengali, I don't speak your language, but when it comes to India, we feel we're Indians. But this is captured in, there is a measure called ethno-linguistic fractionalization. According to ethno-linguistic fractionalization, we differ in ethnicity. You cannot deny the fact that when you look at a South Indian and you look at a North Indian, they look different. We speak different languages, we have different religions. Even within a religion, you may be a vegetarian, you may be a non-vegetarian. India ranked among the top 67 countries. And in 2005, if you look at the expanded social diversity index, we were, and that expanded ethno-linguistic social diversity index incorporates linguistic, racial and religious aspects. We were in the top 2 deciles. So building the nation was a huge job. And how did democracy help? To cut a long story short, I mean, this book gives different, what happened in Junagadh, what happened in Hyderabad, what happened in even Jodhpur. The Praja Mandals were there. The Praja Mandals were committed to democracy. India was a democracy. So I believe it helped immensely that we are a democracy, that we could incorporate these princely states and build this integrated Indians. More than that. So what you got is a country. But now Indians had to be built. Again, don't take me amiss. I'm not saying the basic seed of Indianness was not there, but it had to be promoted. And there, and we are not the first. Even in Italy, when they unified the country, they were fully aware of the fact they've got Italy as a country, but they don't have Italians. So Italians had to be nurtured. In France, they actually said that when you have got France, now you have to build French citizens. So in India also we have the same job, where rather than you saying that I'm a Marathi, you say I'm an Indian. I also say I'm an Indian. Then we talk about I speak Bengali, you speak Marathi. We have done that. And in that, democracy was very important because democracy is accommodative. And mind you, don't take it lightly. You're all young guys, but still I think you remember the time, 1990. In our lifetime, very much in my lifetime at least, we have seen other countries. The Soviet Union broke up. And they had an authoritarian leader like Stalin. And you go to the former Soviet Union now, you'll find the countries have splintered. Pakistan, our next door neighbor, they splintered. I used to go to Yugoslavia when I used to work in IMF. Didn't realize the country will break up. The country broke up into 6 republics. No matter what Winston Churchill may have said, we Indians, we are so inefficient that we couldn't prove Winston Churchill right, that we'll break up right after independence. Now, so nation building, the only 2 countries that have succeeded are China and India. And we are large countries, both large countries. But the methods have been very different. China has used brute force. Whereas what we have done is a much more accommodative stance. Look at our history. Our history, right from the days, though Congress talked about that it should be linguistically sort of organized states, the enthusiasm went because when our leadership realized that governing this country and holding it together is not easy. And the first thing that happened was Andhra Pradesh. And it happened after there was a fast unto death, Ramalu. Maharashtra and Gujarat, there used to be riots in Bombay. And the leadership went back and said, let's have reorganization. So from 14, I think we started with 14, now we have 28. No problem, accommodate. You want to be a separate state? So it was a much more accommodative stance. And I think democracy helped in that. Now, let me come to the economic part of it. See, I will always talk about politics and economics together. Your Vice Chancellor was asking me that political economy, should we emphasize it more? I told him that I believe that rigorous training in economic methodology, including game theory, is more important in the beginning. Then you will realize why some assumptions are not valid. It's much more complex. Then you can come to political economy. I'm not saying political economy is not important, but there is an interaction between politics and economics. And that is what is very important. So we may have started off with illiteracy, poverty, transportation system is not developed, health system is not developed. But the people are improving. When people improve, that means the country is developing, the people are becoming less backward. And the corollary is, just as politicians are doing good things, people are demanding better things from them. So this interaction between politics and economics is very important. I will do, if you elect me as a leader, I'll do what you guys will vote me for. And if I find that you're voting me for things that help development, I'll do that. So if you periodize the development in India, economic development, I find three periods are very important. The first period, I call it the Nehruvian period of 1947 to 1964. The second period is 1964 to 1991. See, the Nehruvian period, I call it a period of policy autonomy and democratic socialism. The second period is more politics than economics, and it's Nehruvian policies with a populist twist. And the third period from 1991 is reforms with its ups and downs. So let me briefly go through these three periods. Please don't hesitate to stop me and ask me questions, as long as they're not very detailed questions. The post-independence, in the initial years, the role of the people in the design of policies, I think, was very limited. It was almost like a power of attorney that has been given to the leaders, because these leaders were glowing in the glow of having won independence. So we're ready to entrust them with the job of, you decide, we'll follow. So Pandit Nehru, the first Prime Minister, he didn't suffer much from the pulls and pressures of public demands. And development strategy was strongly the socialist planning strategy, with the state commanding the heights of the economy. Indian leaderships rapidly expanded the state's role in the promotion of development activities and managing public sector enterprises. Perhaps this was even ahead of the capacity of the state to manage such an expansion. I mean, it's very easy to open a central public sector enterprise, but to find the men and women to run it, who have the capacity to run an organization, is not easy. And there was a prioritization. Prioritization is, you have these enterprises, they will generate money, and then we'll build the physical infrastructure, we'll do education and health. In fact, Professor Mahalanobis, one of the great doyens, when I criticize them, the advantage of hindsight is that we have 20/20 eyesight. But at that time, these guys were very... Professor Kelkar must have known Professor Mahalanobis. You must have seen him. Yeah. So he actually believed that these public sector enterprises will make so much money that we don't need taxes even. We'll run everything according to them. Now, Robin Meredith, you've heard the name, he's a popular writer. He wrote a book in which he recounts an Indian joke about Deng Xiaoping, the next supreme leader of China after Mao Zedong. Deng is in his car, reading a newspaper. His driver interrupts and asks, "Comrade, there is a problem." He asks, "What?" He says, "The sign says, turn left for communism, turn right for capitalism. What should I do?" Deng tells the driver, "No problem, just signal left and turn right." So, Deng Xiaoping in China, he followed capitalism for his economics and Marxism for his politics. In India, we followed just the reverse. We followed democracy for our politics and socialism for our economics. Now, the pluralist politics means in India, there have been infringements, but we must be proud of the fact that our fundamental rights are protected. You have recourse to administration, you have recourse to parliament, you have recourse to legislative assembly, you have recourse to judiciary. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, we know there are practical difficulties of following socialist planning, and how in the early 1990s, all these practitioners of socialist policies failed. The Soviet Union disappeared. China, after Mao, started following capitalist policies. East Europe, all the members of Comecon, overnight almost, I mean, it's unbelievable. I have lived through that period. I used to go to Eastern Europe. Couldn't believe it when the Berlin Gate was opened. Unbelievable that this happened overnight almost. Now, was it a mistake? Now that we know it was not the correct policy, mind you, must be careful in criticizing our forefathers, because at that time, even non-Marxist economists, for example, the Nobel laureate Paul Samuelson in 1967 and Joseph Schumpeter in 1942 had predicted that socialism will win over capitalism. So even if our forefathers committed a mistake, they were in good intellectual company. But two issues crop up. Even if we say, okay, many people committed the mistake, our forefathers also committed the mistake. The two issues that crop up is the relative neglect of education and health and the reluctance to admit failure when it was clear that it's not working. Now, mind you, Theodor Schulz, he got the Nobel Prize for his pioneering work on human capital and also agricultural economics. He was awarded the Nobel Prize in 1979. But that's much later. But John Kenneth Galbraith, he was 6 feet 7 inches tall. He was the US ambassador to India in the 1960s, 61 to 63. Pandit Nehru was very much alive. It is very unlikely that Galbraith, that unstoppable man, couldn't have told our leadership about the importance of education. Galbraith is famous for having said, nowhere in the world is there an illiterate peasantry that is not poor, and there is no place in the world where there is a literate peasantry which is not rich. He also used to say that there is no place in the world where a well-educated population is really poor. Now, maybe I have become a rebel and I have become a revolutionary. I believe the concerns that we had at that time, in our childhood days we used to hear, oh, don't educate these people, what will you do with this educated unemployed? I believe educate them, you don't have to employ them, they will find ways of employing others. So education was not sort of emphasized enough. Why do we say that? Because I don't find Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, he was the education minister, he writes in places that I spoke, and the finance department is saying there is no money. For education there was no money. Like education, health was another area which suffered relative neglect. The first 5-year plan noted that only 3% of the households in India had toilets. 3%. But you don't find the 5-year plans talking about toilets. The idea was that you'll have. Now let me not go on to that. Another number, you know that WHO says that we need 1 doctor per 1,000 people. In 1961, on average, there was only 1 doctor for 18,751 people. There are not enough doctors. Anyway, the MBBS degree, even now I find the middle class has captured politics. So we talk about MBBS. Even for a simple thing, rather than going to the primary health center, we immediately run to a doctor with an MS or MD, which a simple primary health care doctor can take care of. So the MBBS degrees or MBBS courses prime students for MS levels rather than making them well-rounded primary physicians. Now let me then come to the next question. By the end of the Nehru era, doubts had arisen about the efficiency of democratic socialism. But effective opposition to Pandit Nehru's policies had disappeared by the early 1950s. Sardar Patel, mind you, if you look at the Congress history, you will find there were always inner party politics. One guy fighting against the other, were discussing how many of our great leaders didn't agree with each other. So Sardar had passed away on 15 December 1950. Rajendra Prasad, who was again a strong leader, he had become the President of India, a ceremonial post. Rajaji had resigned as Union Home Minister on 25th October 1951 and gone to Chennai. He became Chief Minister for some time, then left the Congress. So Nehru's policies were not working, but there was no one inside who could actually stand up and say it's not working. So my personal belief is that before Rajaji coined that, he was called the Chanakya of Indian politics. He coined the term permit quota license Raj. But permit quota license Raj was known. So the question is, why wasn't it dismantled earlier? That it was introduced is another thing. That was introduced in good intentions. But why wasn't it? I believe there are several reasons for it. One, accepting responsibility for a policy failure is difficult for a politician. It's difficult for you and me also. When something I said didn't turn out the way I said it would, and you tell me you said it wrongly, I'll find excuses. Isliye nahi hua, aapne ye kiya, and so on. For a politician, it's even more difficult. See, because a politician, a political leader has got followers who carry the people for him. For them to go and say that what the leader said is wrong. And mind you, this infallibility, that if I am a leader, I can never be wrong, is a problem not only for Indians. The Paul Krugman, I must tell you that famous quotation of Paul Krugman. Paul Krugman has written about how American politicians in 2017, at least on one side of the aisle, is suffering from an epidemic of infallibility, of powerful people who never, ever admit to being wrong. So that is a problem. You'll find any political party or any political leader, when they take a wrong decision, they're very reluctant to admit that they committed a mistake. And then there are vested interests. What are the vested interests? One is the central public sector enterprise employees. They had certainty of tenure. You can't fire them. Article 12 covers them. They're getting more salaries, particularly in the lower level. If you have gone to any of these public sector compounds, they have swimming pools, they have schools, they have lovely houses. So it was a very valued job, and the number was not many. And during Indira Gandhi's time it expanded, but even then with 50,000 people employed by central public sector undertaking, these were an important vested interest group which didn't want to let go. Second, the bureaucrats and the politicians, they had a major stake in the perpetuation of the system. the permit quota license Raj had been converted into an exchange system. I give you an appointment, you give me payoffs, power, prestige. I appoint the board members, patronage, employment for the relatives. Even after my retirement, I can get a job in a public sector undertaking. So this was the second vested interest group. And third, surprisingly, Indian capitalists. Indian capitalists also had a vested interest. If you look at the Bombay Plan, it was called a Plan for Economic Development of India. Many of you may wonder why is it called Bombay Plan. It was called Bombay Plan because it was formulated in the Bombay House of the Tatas. Since it was formulated in the Bombay House of the Tata, it was called the Bombay Plan. Even the Bombay Plan, which was signed by J.R.D. Tata, G.D. Birla, Sir Ardeshit Dalal, Lala Sriram, Kasturbhai Lalbhai, A.D. Shroff, John Mathai, and Purushottam Das Thakur Das, they also said you need planning. The capitalists are saying you need planning. And then I also find that once you have got a license, you don't want competition. You want to. So these are the reasons why it was not dismantled earlier. Now I come to the mid-1960s after Pandit Nehru's demise. See, Nehru was like a colossus. There is no denying that in his time. But when he died, a broken man after the Chinese debacle, the country had also progressed. Mind you, even if we did not progress as much as we should have done in the first period under Nehru, it was not bad compared to our colonial days. I'll give you one figure which is according to Mukherjee. National income of the Indian Union, that is the geographical composition that is India. Before 1947 it was an undivided India. If you take the Indian area, it had increased 80%, 80, during the first half of the 20th century. The Indian Republic in the first 15 years, 80% in the first half of the 20th century. It almost in 15 years we matched that performance. 50 years and 15 years. Similarly, if you look at the per capita increase is much faster. In terms of literacy was only 16.1% in 1941. It increased to 28.3% in 1961 and more than doubled to 34.45% in 1971. India was transforming. It was transforming slower than East Asia, but it was transforming. So I come back to my main point that Indians are changing. So it will have an effect on the economic policy. The grip of the Congress was going because the Congress was almost like a zamindari system. You have satraps in villages who will mobilize the votes. Now the people are rising. They don't listen to the satraps. Now, so there is this feedback to economic policy because the people are changing. The overwhelming electoral dominance of the Congress party was disappearing. This Rajni Kothari calls, I think, the second voting system. It's all sometimes called the first voting system, second voting system. There's a 4-period periodization. I make it a 3-period classification because of my emphasis on economics. The regional parties are rising. In the late 1960s, you find parties like Charan Singh has moved, Congress breakaways are coming. The Congress system is in turmoil. Regional parties, Even Kamaraj lost the election. Kamaraj had said that I can win the election sleeping. Kamaraj lost. DMK, ADMK came later. DMK, then socialist parties in UP, Bihar. So the identity, mind you, India is a sleeping giant. When the people are progressing, first I become aware of my identity. Then later I realize it's foolish. What is this identity? Okay, so this is the second period. And then what they had to do, Mrs. Gandhi came to power. And she was responding to the people. So there were slogans like Garibi Hatao. And actually, society was developing so fast. The state almost got overwhelmed. Emergency came in 1974. It's our good luck that the state re-established control and we came back to democracy. So this is the period when the period of doles, subsidies, all these came. Dr. Kelkar can give you a long history of the oil, what a complex system they devised. So this was the period of the second period of Nehruvian policies with a twist. Mind you, the implication of this was, and this we know from all democracies, see, politicians like to spend money because that can win votes. They don't like to tax. You will find there are many demands from the people. Reduce this price. Reduce the price of gas. You ask them, how will I reduce the price of gas? Will I spend less on something? They'll say no. Don't spend less, spend more on this subsidy. Will I tax more? No, don't tax. This is an impossible, it's an impossible trinity. So, but that is what happened. Fiscal deficit went up. We had balance of payments problem. Mind you, we went to the IMF for balance of payments support in 1957, in 1962, in 1965, 1981, then 1991. I think I need to leave you with enough time for questions and answers, so I'll cut short my last part, which is from 1991, which is period of reforms with ups and downs. Now the story of Narasimha Rao, how he came to power, how Rajiv Gandhi went out of power, the short period when there were 3 prime ministers in 19 months. And Narasimha Rao, mind you, he is acknowledged as the father of economic reforms along with his finance minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh. He lost the election, he lost his Congress presidentship, and then in that period, there was utter instability. And people thought that India is doomed with fractured mandates, political uncertainty, unstable governments. But India proved them wrong. India proved them wrong after Gujral. Atal Bihari Vajpayee came as the BJP Prime Minister. He then lost by a single vote. From 1999, as you know, we have had governments which lasted the whole 5 years. There are no more fractured mandates. Identity politics is losing its salience because Indians are realizing what is good for a Gujarati must be good for a Madrasi also. Why should it be bad? I don't understand. So policies are looking and identity is becoming much less important with the spread of education, urbanization. Now in this room I don't know how many states are represented. It doesn't, you're not fighting with each other because saying that I'm a Gujarati, you're a Maharashtrian. So identity is losing its salience. issues are becoming much more important. Now, let me just why am I so confident about the future, bright future of Indian democracy? First, let me start with political stability, the essential ingredient for healthy growth and development. So I've already told you that what seemed lost during the 3 prime ministers in 19 months, now that's not a major concern. That is India going to give a fractured mandate? I personally believe, don't blame me if I turn wrong, but I'm sincerely hoping, no matter what, it will be a decisive mandate, one way or the other. I mean, there was UPA rule for 10 years. Then we have seen NDA rule for 10 years. So 10 years is becoming, now no longer people talk about whether 5 years this government will last or not, whether it will last for 10 years or not. Now, this also is measured by, I don't know whether you have read about the effective number of parties. See, when you have parties, you may have some national parties, some state parties, and some regional parties. That is not important. What is important is effective number of parties. That means if the parties got equal number of votes, and the fracture, I won't go into the details of explaining the formula, but let me give you an example. Suppose you have an election with 3 parties commanding almost equal support of a third of the voters, almost a third, so 3 parties, and another election with 6 parties in the fray, only the 2 largest commanding 50% and 30% votes. Which one has got more number of effective parties? The second one has got 6, first one has got 3, but the second one has got fewer number of effective parties. So you have to measure it properly. For lack of time, I will not go into the Lasko-Tagapera effective number of parties formula. But what has happened is that the effective number of parties in terms of Lok Sabha seats, after declining almost steadily from 3.2 in 1967 to 1.7 in 1984, jumped up to 4.1 in 1989 and declined to 3.6 in 1991. It increased again and remained above 5 in 1996 to 1999 to reach a high of 6.5 in 2004. From 2004 it has declined. It has come down to 3. From 2004 we have seen a period of political consolidation. The electorate is transforming. The popular upsurge in the post-Nehruvian period, which could be described in Naipaul's words as a million mutinies, is stabilizing. I think we Indians are now more at peace with ourselves. Previously, this discomfort that we had. I'm very fond of saying that if your grandfather and my grandfather were to meet, after half an hour they wouldn't know what to talk about. They couldn't have a meal with each other. But I'm perfectly fine if you serve me Srikhand, and you're perfectly fine if I give you Mishti Doi. So there is no problem anymore that way. Second is the continuity of economic policy. See, many times we have found that one party is initiating a reform, the next party is completing it. Examples: VAT, FRBM, GST. It's not that कि तुमने किया तो मैं नहीं करूँगा. Huh? Yeah. So that's the second one. Third is the primary education and primary health. See, I read somewhere that 40% is considered to be the threshold. I couldn't find the reference. I've forgotten where I read it. Japan reached that during the Meiji era. So now we have crossed that 40%. Now we have 77.7% literacy. I'm surprised actually. Bhabatosh Bhatto, one of our great professors in economics, he used to say that I find transformation because even in our childhood days we could find people with going bare feet. He used to say, now I don't find anyone bare feet. Now I don't find any Indian who can't read road signs. In our childhood days it was impossible. I mean, they could read road signs, no problem. So the social fragmentation we know in economics leads to demand for higher subsidies. The reason is simple. Social fragmentation, so school, again, your child will go there and my grandson, you're a low caste guy. School nahi chahiye. Paisa de do, 500 rupiya de do, theek hai. But now social fragmentation is going. So the demand for public goods, roads, education, health is increasing, and the demand for roti kapra makan is giving place to bijli sarak pani. Then the next is the breakthrough in technology and entrepreneurship. Chandrayaan has just happened, so you know that some of our boys and girls are capable of doing the very best that anyone is doing in the world. And the rise of unicorns, which are new companies which are going for, with a valuation of more than $1 billion, is more than 100. So you have unleashed the Banya talent in us, which is a great thing, which hasn't happened for centuries in India. So I think I end with the observation that some of us worry about religious strife. See, there is the theory of secularization. Secularization is that when you have development and growth, it's not that religion disappears. Religion is very much there. And you don't need to be irreligious to be secular. Mahatma Gandhi, I don't think anyone will call him communal. Maybe Mr. Jinnah would call him communal. But he was a very devout Hindu. But he was secular. But what happens in the secularization hypothesis is your time becomes more precious. So there is no time for organized religion. You may do your puja in the morning or pray to Allah at home, but you don't have time to go to the temple or mosque or go for thing. Now that we have seen in many places in the world. Is secularization not happening in India? There I have a hypothesis that I have offered. See, one of the things that has afflicted Hindu society, not only Hindu society, I will be wrong in saying Hindu society, caste is an affliction for all societies in India, including Muslims, Christians, everywhere. Ambedkar used to say that caste is what has killed us. Now what is happening is caste consolidation. And this is, if you look at the reports, you will find, this by self-declaration, you will find that the caste fragmentation is decreasing. And there is no time to go into the details of it. There is this theory of polarization and fractionalization. This is work by one of our Indian economists, Debraj Ray and Esteban. Now there is a very important hypothesis which I believe in. And the hypothesis is that there are two things that are important. You belong to one caste, I belong to one caste. That is fractionalization. The other is the animosity, the hostility that I have towards you. Both are important. Now when it comes to this polarization, that is the hostility, their size matters. Size matters. If you are too small a group, what will you do? If you are a very large group, you will not feel insecure. So, I will read religious conflicts and associated deaths have not gone down steadily with development. Is India an exception to the secularization hypothesis? It appears that a hasty conclusion may be unwarranted for 4 reasons. First, while the macro-level figures of communal riots in India show no clear downward trend, the sporadic Hindu-Muslim riots tend to occur in some specific states, and within these states, in some specific cities. There are no wars of all Hindus and Muslims in India. Second, some scholars point out that state-wise analysis of data on religious riots between 1982 and 1995 indicates that 1% increase in growth rate decreases the probability of riots by 5%. 18 states in the north, particularly Bihar and UP, which are believed to be some of the worst affected by the riots, are also the states that have not done as well in economic growth as the relatively peaceful states in the south. Third, Muslims in India lag behind other religious communities in socio-economic terms such as education, health, and income. Their rapid upliftment is an urgent necessity for the country to make progress in economic terms and in population control. However, changes in relative incomes can upset the social ranking of religious communities and cause resentment. Riots will decrease when there is balanced growth of all communities. Fourth, perhaps the caste consolidation that is going on in Hindu society, it has an inverted U-shaped impact on religious conflicts. Caste consolidation takes place. I will not go into the mathematics. Religious riots will increase. Then it reaches a point where it starts decreasing. So when the caste consolidation is complete, it will happen. So animosity may in fact increase when diverse groups from different clusters, or even one group forms a cluster when the others remain as they are. Fractionalization may decrease because caste consolidation is taking place. But intragroup identification and intergroup alienation may increase and create a more polarized situation. Let me not elaborate on this because you need to look at, even I get a hang of it, but not complete. But I do believe that the caste consolidation that is happening, particularly among the Hindus, is a good thing, but it will have that side effect for some time until 2/3 of the population are consolidated. Then it will become big enough not to feel any insecurity. So let me now end by saying that India is changing and so are the Indians. And there is a symbiotic relationship between the two. That is where the political economy comes in. This symbiosis makes India's search for glory less and less elusive over the years. And we have seen that it is the increasing role of the people and their endorsement that is determining policy. What people want is what the politicians will have to deliver. It is a manifestation of the maturing of Indian democracy and the socio-economic progress of the Indians. In October 2010, Harvard economist Lawrence Summers, who was Treasury Secretary under President Clinton and economic advisor to President Obama, said, I quote, "Perhaps in 2040, the discussion will be less about the Washington consensus or the Beijing consensus than about the Mumbai consensus, a third way not based on ideas of laissez-faire capitalism that have proven obsolete or ideas of authoritarian capitalism that ultimately will prove not to be enduringly successful, instead a Mumbai consensus based on the idea of a democratic developmental state, driven not by a mercantilist emphasis on exports, but a people-oriented emphasis on growing levels of consumption and a widening middle class." This is the same Lawrence Summers when he was World Bank's vice president and chief economist in mid-1992, had presciently predicted that the rise of China would be a transcendent event and its economy would overtake the US economy. He proved right. Thank you.
So please keep your questions brief. Please identify yourself. And I'll request both the questioner and the answerer, Dr. Lahiri, to keep it brief so we can accommodate more questions. Yeah, Professor Bansode, can you please give a
Thank you for this talk which you have given. I just have one query in terms of the whole
this
idea
is Professor
of
Prashant, he's a professor here, just to identify. Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
So the whole idea about caste consolidation. So is it in terms of upliftment? If it is in terms of upliftment, it is a product of the affirmative action, I guess, when you talk about caste consolidation. So that is one. And the another thing is that if at all you say that there is no fragmentation on caste lines, but if you see matrimonial websites, so you'll get to know how many castes are there even amongst Brahmins. Okay, so and in that way we see that how divided are we on the whole issue about marriage as an institution. So as Ambedkar said that the test of being non-caste or accommodative in terms of caste is the test of endogamy. So we still continue to be an endogamous kind of a society as far as Hinduism or Hindus is concerned. So would this theory of caste consolidation stand?
I think the question is what makes you so confident that caste consolidation is going on? And in fact, there are a lot of indications and evidence of continuing and more further fragmentation.
And even if you see National Crime Records Bureau, given official statistics about atrocities that are committed against the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes, and which are increasing over a period of time. So how do you justify it?
I follow your question. See, I have not claimed that caste has disappeared from India. I am saying it is on the wane. Just take a look, urbanization. I am not even aware of the caste of my neighbor. Here, the boys and girls who are here, I wonder how many of you are aware of what is the caste of the boy or the girl who is sitting next to you. Now, it's not my contention that people are not paying their attention to caste in every marriage, but it's my contention that intercaste marriage is increasing tremendously, very fast. It's similarly, I'll just stop by giving you a story. We had a great professor of economics in Delhi School of Economics called Professor K.N. Raj. And K.N. Raj was in a BBC interview. So someone asked, the interviewer asked, Professor Raj, in Delhi School of Economics, do you have any scheduled caste teachers? K.N. Raj said, I'm one of them. Before that, we didn't even know that K.N. Raj is it. Now, in Gokhale Institute of, it became Gokhale. In Calcutta, we have Gokhale College and Gokhale School. You call him Gokhale, we call Gokhale. Anyway, but he is a great leader, Gokhale. So, the issue is in the salience of caste is decreasing very fast. Is it fast enough for my satisfaction? No. But it is fast. Intercaste marriages, just find out how many of your known, when a boy falls in love with a girl, does he find out what caste she is from?
And we'll take. Yeah, that gentleman at the back. Yeah, please, attention. Please keep. We don't have that much time.
Urbanization and increase in education is becoming a major, I believe that's a great thing that is happening.
Yeah. Question, please. Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, sir. My name is Vishesh Agrawal. I'm a first year student for BSc Economics here in Gokhale Institute of Economics. And my question is, as you said that caste, the problems concerning the caste system is decreasing in India and we are moving towards a modernization. So the caste reservations which are there in the education system are leading towards a very problematic issue that we don't have so much educated and skilled people in the sectors which we should have, like health and education sector, where because of the reservations people are going who are not that skilled and who are not that educated enough.
What's your question, please?
My question is that what should we do about the reservation system first, and second.
One question, please.
Okay.
Yeah, many people. Yeah. Okay, complete your second question, quick.
Yeah, second question is that it is very important for the students, the young students, to vote. So what steps could be taken to spread awareness for the for the vote?
So two questions. What is your view on reservation? And secondly, how can we make more young people vote in elections? Please ask only one question per person because we have...
See, about affirmative action, it's a very complex issue. I do believe that if we could make a distinction about economically weaker sections and caste, we can take them together. But it's a very problematic area, and particularly after I joined politics and became a legislative assembly member, how do I find out the income of a farmer? It's impossible. I mean, everyone will come and claim that their income is 6,000 rupees per month. I know it for a fact that it's not true.
But why did the ruling party impose on this new condition called, when economics is a fluid marker, how can you have reservation based on your economic status? It changes day to day.
I know it's a problematic area. But having said that, let me say a word in favor of affirmative action. I have realized this, that one of the major impediments for a poor family's boy or girl in education is the education of their parents. For a boy or a girl to grow up in a house where there are books and the mother is educated, the father is educated, there are no discrimination, and it so happens, you cannot deny the fact that the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, most of them come from less well-off families. There are exceptions, but on average they have a lot of impediments, they have a lot of problems. They're not as lucky as the upper castes are. So, but affirmative action, I'm not an expert, so I wouldn't comment on it. But you have in many countries, including the United States.
And voting by youngsters.
Voting by youngsters. You know, that is another difference between economics, competitive markets, and politics. See, in economics and markets, you vote according to your purchasing power. In elections, you vote one man, one vote. So everyone can think, what will happen if I don't vote? Ek vote se thodi haar jayega. But this, I think, is an irresponsible behavior. And as awareness increases, see, turnouts are not too bad in India. If you compare it with United States, we are doing quite well. And I believe that over time, turnout may increase. And turnout increases particularly in important elections, when something important is going to be decided. But you touch a very important point. It's very important for you guys, especially young guys, to vote. For heaven's sake, vote. Either vote for me or vote against me. Don't be indifferent.
Yeah, please keep it brief. Huh?
Yeah. My question is towards the journey towards the glory, which I believe, I think you also sounded same thing. Political stability is an important factor, But then this new trend which has been coming up last years is giving freebies to win election anyhow. Where it is going to last? I mean, it is definitely going to affect the economy somewhere.
Okay. How can glory come if there are more and more freebies raining from above?
See, there are two levels of government, three levels of government that we should distinguish. One is the union government, the other is the state government, third is the local governments. Now, state governments and local governments, they are dependent on the union government for permission to borrow. So what will happen if they cannot borrow more, if they cannot increase their fiscal deficit, when they give more freebies, what will happen is that development will be affected, their revenues will be affected, they have to spend less on something else. So again, it's the electorate who will find, yes, I'm getting 500 rupees, 1,000 rupees, but the roads are not getting repaired, schools are not functioning properly. And so that hard budget constraint will work. In the case of union government, again, it's the electorate. If the electorate really like freebies rather than development, then we're doomed. But I do believe that the Indian voters are becoming, they're not fools. When they find that you are giving a freebie, they're already asking the question, kahan se aayega? What is it affecting? So it's the maturity of the voter. Ultimately, if Indians want freebies, then they will get their freebies and no development. But the burden of my song is, they're no fools. Indians will realize already the clamor for that. Look at gas prices. It went to 1100 rupees. People understood the logic of it. There was no rebellion on the streets. But in the 70s, if that same thing would have happened, buses would have been burnt, trams would have been burnt. That didn't happen.
Yep. Lady in yellow. Yeah.
Good evening, sir. I'm Neerja from FY. I had a question regarding the journey towards glory. Is this glory possible with a significant amount of brain drain? Plus, these brain drains are usually associated with people who are educated. So, can we grow with a significant number of our people giving up on their citizenship?
Okay, that's yeah.
Brain drain, I'll only tell you, you may not have heard the name of this great economic administrator called Abid Hussain. Dr. Abid Hussain used to say that Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi called him one day and said, Abid Saab, what do we do about brain drain? So Abid Hussain is a remarkable man with a great gift of the gab. He said, Mr. Prime Minister, brain drain is better than brain down the drain. Now, the point is, I think, when a boy or a girl goes, I also went abroad, I stayed there for 10 years and I came back. Anyone who leaves home with a very heavy heart. So many of you will stay back, some of you will go abroad, where if your choice is between 70,000 rupees or 60,000 rupees a month in India for a job, and there you are getting, at 80 rupees a dollar, you are getting $3,000, that is 2,40,000. You may not go. But here if you are getting 20,000 rupees a month, and there you are getting 2.5 lakhs per month, then you will go. So there are enough, see, people may go, but there will be enough left from where they came.
You know, if you are 1 in a million person in India, there are still 1 million of you. So let 1 million people go. And you know, the biggest earning, number one earning for India in terms of is remittances. So it's thanks to our people who are abroad. We get 70 to 100 billion dollars every year, highest in the world, consistently for last 27, 30 years. The next person. Now let's start 2 or 3 questions. Yeah.
Good evening, sir.
Can you just bunch the 2 questions and then 2 or 3? So yeah, you then this lady in the front. Yeah.
Good evening, sir. My question was related to coalition government. I mean, coming into coalition government, does it create ideological differences in governing one state? And does it make the governance more harder?
Of course,
So
in fact, it's called, Dr. Manmohan Singh used to call it coalition compulsions. See, I want to be a minister and I want to continue to be a minister. So if the coalition demands something to stay in power, it's very difficult. After all, politicians are also human beings of flesh and blood. So they have their... So coalitions, I don't think coalitions are good. However, having said that, some detractors will point out that Narasimha Rao's government was a minority government. Atal Bihari Vajpayee's government was a coalition government. So how you handle the coalition is very important. It's an art.
Yeah, go ahead.
Last question.
Good evening, sir. Yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed your lecture. You mentioned India took the accommodative stance towards nation building because of asymmetry in our federalism. Going forward, I want to understand what is your idea of composite culture, which is mentioned in our constitution, because our constitution doesn't define it. So I want to understand your idea of it.
You're taking me beyond the book, but see, composite culture, I'll tell you that I'm a very proud Indian. I'm very proud about my heritage because I'm very tolerant. To me, it doesn't matter what you do. So composite culture, the main characteristic of that composite culture is that Tagore, I don't know how to translate it, this is Mohamanave Shagor Tire. This is a place where people have come, we have digested them, and we have built the composite culture out of that. There is no exclusivity. But again, you're asking me a question, young lady, which is beyond my remit. As composite culture is such a complex subject that I wouldn't dare answer that question. They're better experts. Ask the Vice Chancellor to call a better expert on this.
No, I'm sure there's lots to discuss. In fact, we already made an invitation, so he'll come for a little longer period so he can give a series of lectures. So I think we are almost out of time, but I can't resist and use my privilege as moderator. And you can give me a one-line or a two-line answer. So what is this glory that we are in search of? You didn't define glory. Is it Nobel Prize or UN Security Council seat? Or is it drinking water for everybody? What is this glory we are seeking?
Ajit, you have had a sort of habit of asking very difficult questions. Glory, to me, do you feel glorious?
Yes, already.
Then that's the glory. Now, the issue is, to be treated with honor. I mean, I feel very rankled by the fact that for 200 years, that small little island, they came. I don't know what your ancestors and my ancestors were doing. I'm sure if they tried now, they would have much more difficulty.
Thank you. So please give him a warm applause for his talk. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your enlightening words and your gracious presence today. Your words surely added to our knowledge on the topic in discussion. I would also like to thank the Vice Chancellor, sir, attendees, faculty members, organizers, Gokhale Institute and the Pune International Center for their dedicated attention and thoughtful questions. I would now request our Vice Chancellor, sir, to kindly extend a token of appreciation to our guest, Dr. Ashok Lahiri, which is a book written by Mahatma Gandhi on Gopal Krishna Gokhale. I would also request sir to present a token of appreciation to Dr. Vijay Kelkar, the Vice President of Pune International Center and the former Chairman of Finance Commission of India. Thank you for attending.